Hi, Cara.
Hi, Terry. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. And congratulations to you.
Thank you. I'm very, very, very happy. So I'm very excited too.
Yeah, very, very pleased to have you on board.
Thank you.
So, just I'll bring you up to speed a little bit, because it's been a while since you've had the time to come and play on this side. So, we've been kind of plugging on mostly with communications work this year. So I've been doing a bunch of conference speaking, explaining the roadmap and letting people know what's going on. Um, you may have seen we did a slot at DevOps World, and yesterday I was at APCSM, which is the Advanced Process Control and Smart Manufacturing Conference in the US. Where there's a lot of people working with machine learning in the semiconductor industry. So that's been quite positive. We've had a lot of interest in consuming the roadmap, so people are definitely keen to understand what the challenges are. But we haven't had much in the way of contribution this year to extend things. So one of the things that I need to do over the next month really is get some updates into this year's document, and get some people to review it, see if anyone has anything that they do want to contribute, and then start the work to finalize a 2021 release. Attendance at the meetings has been low over the past month or so, but it does tend to drop off over the summer period as people are busy doing other things. But I think we will probably need to pick up on some more promotional work for next year so that we can encourage more contributors. Other than that, really the big news this year is the move towards regulation on AI within the European Union. And that was a significant topic of concern at this week's conference. The draft legislation puts a spanner in the works for quite a lot of industry when it comes to automating process control systems and things like that. So it's been helpful for us to help to describe some of the issues there. And I think one of the updates that we need to do is to just discuss some of the challenges specifically in some of those areas that will impact anyone that's trying to do machine learning work in the EU. The situation in the UK has obviously changed now post-Brexit, with the UK government no longer considering any need for immediate AI legislation. So things will carry on as they are, with just standard data protection rules applying.
Terry, can you explain a little bit more about the changes in EU regulation and how you see that impacting process automation?
Yeah, sure. So basically what's happening is that the EU has defined a series of classifications for different types of machine learning product. And certain products will be completely prohibited. So there are a number of concerns about the use of targeted data to manipulate particular groups. So those types of activities will be completely prohibited. But then there's a much broader category, which is, they describe it as high-risk AI systems. And it's anything relating to safety, a bunch of things associated with process control, in terms of things like autonomous robots used in manufacturing. So, any type of equipment that might be making decisions. And then also anything related to employment or allocation of tasks. And all of these things are classified as high risk, and high risk applications will be regulated. So that regulation basically brings in a whole set of requirements. And let me just flip across, because I think I've got a list open here. Yes. Just 1 second while I get to the relevant section. Yeah, so in order to comply with this regulation, you're going to have a set of mandatory data quality controls. So all the stuff that we talked about last year within the roadmap about having to integrate all of our data management into the continuous delivery process, well, that will be required by law for anything that's classified as high risk. And you will have to have mandatory end-to-end documentation to support that. So you will need the traceability that we've previously been discussing. But they're also requiring transparency of system decisions, and human oversight over the functioning of any systems. And then they also require ongoing publication of accuracy metrics, and you're required to prove that your system is resilient against error or attack. So from a roadmap perspective, it really escalates the need for a whole bunch of the key challenges we addressed last year to actually be worked on and implemented in solutions, because there will be a whole raft of things by 2023 when this is expected to come into force that will be mandated in law, and right now we don't have the tooling to be able to do that. What's not so positive is that in order to release a product that's classified as high risk, you'll be required to pass a third-party conformity assessment. And every time you change anything, you will have to go through a new manual conformity assessment process again. So there's going to be a lot of conflict between teams who are trying to iterate at MLOps speed with regulators who are trying to slow them down to a once or twice a year release cadence. So again, this is going to be one of those areas where only a lot of automation is going to make this viable in a commercial setting. Otherwise, the paperwork's just going to bury people. And there will be other requirements. So what they're calling post-market monitoring, which is basically surveillance of all active AI systems, mandatory incident reporting in the same way that we have with data protection breaches, and a requirement for traceability right across the system's life cycle. So again, that end-to-end audit process that we previously discussed is now going to become law in Europe. And if you don't get it right, it's a 30 million euro fine or 6% of global revenue, whichever is the higher. So it's definitely going to have a very significant impact for anyone either based in Europe or with customers in Europe, because this legislation applies regardless of where you're operating the system. If you have an EU customer in the system, then you have to conform with the legislation. Now, as it stands at the moment, some of the legislation is probably not actually practically implementable because the human oversight provision basically says that it's necessary that any operator of the system can fully understand the capacities and limitations of the high-risk AI system and be able to duly monitor its operation and be able to intervene on the operation of the high-risk AI system or interrupt the system through a stop button. So the legislation as it's worded at the moment requires people to understand how the system is making decisions. But due to the nature of the type of systems that people are likely to build, it's unlikely for any individual human to be able to understand the complexity of the data involved in making those decisions. So it's an unachievable goal in many cases. And the legislative viewpoint at the moment seems to be that if you're going to run an AI system, you need to have a guy walking in front of it with a red flag. So this is likely to really negatively impact the development of machine learning in the European Union. And I'm not sure whether this will make it into the final legislation. It's certainly a significant gap between what's actually going to be built and what the legislation requires.
So this legislation is proposed to be enacted in 2023, but is not yet I don't know, enacted in law yet.
Yeah, so it's going through the process of it went through a review process over the past year to formulate the wording of the legislation. And that wording has now been published, and so it's now entered into the process of being enacted into law. Now there is lobbying going on at the moment to try and improve the quality of the requirements, and I imagine we'll see some fairly significant changes before it's actually passed. But the broad outline of what they think they need has been published.
Right, and this idea of data management as part of an MLOps process is pretty interesting. I actually was, I've read a little bit about some work being done on making data quality systemic, sort of like really looking at that systemically within an MLOps sort of iterative process. And that was pretty cool. Are we looking at that within our roadmap at all?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we had in the roadmap last year, and I think you're probably one of the relevant updates for this year is to really set that in the context of, you know, now these things that we've been discussing are actually going to become legally mandated. So, for example, the law requires that you provide full access to all of your data to nominated surveillance authorities. So it won't be a case of you need to use this data to defend yourself in court if something goes wrong. It will actually be a case that the government will regularly come in and inspect your data, and you'll have an issue if it's not compliant.
Yes. One of the things I was looking at is less from a regulation point of view, but more of how you actually, I guess, massage your data and label it really. If you have conformity in how you're labeling the data, that you can get better results faster with your models and maybe even with less data points. So you can have a smaller amount of data to build your models and refine them. I just thought it was really very interesting and very related to MLOps. And I just wondered if we were looking at that, how to have more conformity in how you're labeling your data. And if we knew of any tools, especially any open source tools that would be helping with that.
Yeah, so I think that's something that we could probably expand on in the technical requirements section. I think the big challenge that we sort of identified last year, but which has become really obvious this year, is that there really are two completely different mindsets in the ML space at the moment. So whilst we've been approaching this from the continuous delivery mindset, you're going to find that the majority of people working in the field and the majority of products and tools that have been built to date are taking the view that machine learning is special, and that it needs dedicated tools which only do machine learning, and which are focused on, you know, primarily manual data science processes about operationally manipulating data sets in real time on, you know, production data stores. So there really is a very big gap between what people are building and doing today, in terms of, you know, just making ad hoc changes to things in production and not having any real track record of what those changes were or any way to reverse them out again, versus the, you know, continuous delivery model of needing to have all of those things in controlled systems with release management processes and governance and all the rest of the good stuff that makes this sustainable. So one of the real challenges that we're still facing is just getting people to understand that, you know, it doesn't matter what they build, as soon as they put it into production, they're going to encounter a whole bunch of challenges that they haven't looked at before, and it's likely to be those challenges that will wreck their product, because right at the last minute they're going to get overwhelmed by a whole bunch of things that they hadn't considered on the route to market. And I think, you know, we've probably got more work to do within the CDF as well, because looking at the other projects that are out there, there really has been very little consideration in the DevOps tooling space for incorporating MLOps as a part of that. So I think one of the things we're going to need to do is to do a bit more evangelizing in terms of convincing people that they need to be thinking about the machine learning aspect of stuff, because we're getting very near a point where every product that's being built will have some aspect of machine learning in it. And so if your tooling doesn't support that, then people won't use your tooling anymore. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on what we can do. Sorry.
No, I think bringing those two groups, those two ways of thinking more closer together, I think is really helpful, and especially informing more about having that regularized, almost like version control, really, for your model development is really positive. Thank you for answering my questions, as always. Really good. Yeah.
Well, I think it's really important that we get more people asking these sorts of questions, because right now there's a lot of assumptions that are being made, and they're unspoken assumptions. And when you start to dig into them, you uncover all sorts of problems that people haven't fully recognized yet. I mean, to give you a feel from the sorts of meetings that I've been having at these conferences, the teams who were primarily involved in this data science work are mathematicians who are, in many cases, straight out of university, and they've got a really deep understanding of the statistics involved, and they're coming up with some really interesting analysis processes to generate good decision making on behalf of the system. But practically, they've had a couple of weeks training in Python and R, and that's the extent of their experience of managing software assets. So they really have absolutely no visibility of all the challenges that happen when you try and put something into a production environment. So there's a lot of problems right now where people are spending months and months building really complicated models, and then basically stumbling at the last minute because they start trying to put this stuff into production, and there are so many issues in trying to manage it effectively that they end up failing. But I think we're probably going to have a separate session in the near future to talk about some of the activities that we need to plan out for the roadmap in general. So I spoke to Jacqueline and Tracy yesterday, and I think they've got some plans to organize some stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to get some of your input on that, because that would be very helpful. But in the meantime, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so unless you've got any other questions, I think we can probably safely wind things up now.
No, that's it. I just wanted to check in again on the roadmap. As you said, it's been a few months since I've been able to look at it, and I wanted to see how it was evolving and what our focus would be for this coming year, essentially. So thank you for that update, and happy to be involved. And I just to let you, I probably won't be able to make it to the SIG because I have another meeting this afternoon, which is really unfortunate, but hopefully I'll be able to be more involved rolling forward. It's a very good
No
question.
problem. No, I don't expect you to show up to all of them. Yeah, I'm happy to sit in the middle and coordinate the two time zones. That's not a problem. But I think the most valuable thing we can probably do is take a step back and spend a little bit of time thinking about the overall strategy and what we need to do over the next year or so to make sure we're managing this asset appropriately.
Great. Sounds great. Thank you so much, Terry.
All right. Well, I look forward to speaking to you soon anyway.